everyone, to the SnapCast podcast with your hosts, Brad O'Brien and Mike Cooley. Guys, look, if this is your first time joining us and you're like, what the hell is this catchy music and this bomb-ass crew? What are we doing here? Well, let me tell you. We're a podcast where we talk about Magic the Gathering and Magic-related things. We're geared towards the casual Magic player with a competitive interest in MTG finance. Fuck yes, Picard. What's up, dude? How are you?
Just got on the bike and needed something to do. Here we are to talk about Modern Horizons 2.
Jam Slam Alabama, as a wise man once said.
Are you saying that you're a wise man?
We could have just gone with it. They would have never known. They'd have been like, that is so catchy. And it's so good.
Slam. Alabama.
Cooley's echoing.
Oh, we do.
Yep.
Hold on.
Thank you. Nailed it. How we doing now? How we doing?
Oh, yeah, he'll be fine.
Yep. We can see it. We could see the audio echoing. Sorry about that little echo, guys, but we just wanted to make the intro epic. And what better way to make it epic than to make it echo?
Right. I mean, what's better than one of you? Two of you.
I don't know about that. Some people would disagree. But, oh my gosh, have you guys seen Zabaz? Zabaz, as the title says, is Zabroken. This card is nuts, man. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about some crazy lists that Brad has sent me that have got me fired up about Magic again. Because if I'm being honest with you guys, and I feel like I really want to be honest with you, ever since they got rid of Mox Opal, my distaste for Modern has been high. All right? I've been bouncing around trying to figure out cool yet broken decks to run with blatant disregard for what might actually be good. And, I've come across some good decks. We like the old toolbox style decks. We like those. But nothing really strikes a chord with me, much like Hardened Scales. And I don't know how the hell we missed this card before.
I can tell you exactly how. Because every card in this set, just about, is a playable Magic card. And there's like 300. Like, it's not a small set. It's a big set.
All the cards are busted.
They really are. So, I know you don't listen to as many other podcasts as I do, but I can tell you the funniest thing about the last 2 weeks of listening to podcasts is that every one of them focuses on what the most powerful card is in Modern Horizons 2. And they're all talking about different cards, and none of them are wrong. None of them are wrong.
I mean, yeah, we touched on this for the past couple of weeks about just how this set, they're really going out of their way to make Modern Legacy. And the fact that we're seeing some of these cards already show up in Legacy lists really just drives that point home. Like, we weren't completely crazy in introducing that idea in the cast because it's already happening as soon as this set comes out. Shit's already making Legacy. Shit's getting crazy, man. The power creep in these cards is just insane.
Yeah, I mean, just exactly. Just as soon as it was allowed on Moto, these cards went through the roof. The Ragavan, the monkey that makes a treasure and lets you exile the top card of your opponent's library, was like $100 over the weekend.
What?
Online.
What?
Because you have to crack packs online to get them.
Oh my gosh.
So they were just through the roof. People needed to draft the set. There weren't that many. I think we just looked before the start of the cast and they're down to about $60.
Jeez.
That's still a sort of obscene for a digital object.
It really is, man. It really is. Wow. Keeping MTGO alive.
We're back to manual.
Yep.
Unfortunately, but when I started to hear that, okay, 2 or 3 days after the set was live, we started getting Modern challenges, and they were like new cards in the first place decks. And of course, we had to talk about Mike's pet deck,
By the way, Sam says, yeah, fuck me. I just need him because he's a pirate.
Yeah, well.
Had to be a pirate among so many other things.
You're not getting that lucky.
Yeah, that is an insane card. But so, like the episode says, we have taken a particular interest in this card called Zabaz. I believe we're pronouncing that correctly, but if not, who gives a shit? Obviously, nobody cares because they just named a card like some unpronounceable name from Alpha. If you missed last week's episode, that I think that's a beacon that just says, "Don't worry about pronouncing this stuff."
You don't actually have to say the name. It's sort of like that line from that movie. Do you know what kind of gun that is? No, I just know the sound it makes when it takes a man's life. Zabaz the Glimmerwasp is a 1-mana 0/0. Trash.
Trash, doesn't meet the vanilla test. Except, man, you remember that busted ability called Modular? Well,
sure don't.
It's back. It is back. Like, I think there must have been a conversation had at Wizards of the Coast that said, yeah, you know what? We completely hosed Affinity and all Affinity variants with our Mox Opal band, and probably Mike Cooley is absolutely pissed. And we need to give him something to get him fired up again. Well, this card has Modular. Modular 1. 1/1 for 1, basically.
Okay.
And, oh my gosh, think about Arcbound Worker, right? And how useful that was in Hardened Scales, and how, just how utility it was in a deck like that. There were so many games where I'm like, oh, I don't have a Hardened Scales, but I do have this worker, this inconspicuous worker that no one's going to worry about, and it's going to win me the game on turn 3, and they don't even know it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the type of, like, that 1/1 Modular 1.
Yeah.
Is just nuts.
Well, and how does it get broken? Let's pretend that not everybody listening is familiar with Hardened Scales.
So, okay, let me break this. I'm going to read the card for you first, and then I'm going to tell you why this is like a jump ahead for Hardened Scales in so many levels. From a player that competitively played Hardened Scales for a very long time, I can tell you all the ways this is just nuts. You might even be able to tell. So 1/1 for 1, because of the Modular 1. And then its first ability, and arguably the most busted, says if a modular triggered ability would put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, that many +1 1/1 counters are put on it instead.
So amped.
That is crazy, all right? And then it has a couple of other abilities where you can pay a mana and destroy target artifact you control. You can pay a mana and give it flying. So this card is nuts. Like, and here's why this card is bonkers in Hardened Scales, right? You remember the scenario I just told you about where I'm like, I don't have a Hardened Scales, but I've got this 1/1 modular guy that's going to win me the game on turn 3. You know what I mean? It was that pattern of thinking where I'm like, okay, this guy's good enough because I don't have a Hardened Scales. But now we have Hardened Scales on a stick for 1 with modular. Think about that for a minute. So either your turn 1 plays are always going to be devastating. You're always going to have a turn 1 Hardened Scales when you're playing Hardened Scales with this guy.
Let me go back to this is the Modern Challenge from June 7th. Today's the 10th?
Yep.
So 3 days ago, we had Hardened Scales take down first place and basically the first Modern Challenge that took place after this set came out. So now you're looking at it sort of in the whole list. This is 4 Arcbound Ravager, 4 Arcbound Worker, 4 Hagerback Walker, 4 Ballista, 4 Zabaz the Glimmerwasp, which is legendary, 4 Ancient Stirrings, 4 Hardened Scales, 1 Animation Module, 1 Power Conduit, 3 Ozolith, 2 Throne of Geth, a Welding Char, and a pile of lands, including 4 Urza. What are you trying to get to?
I'm trying to get to that Ozolith. I got to see this. I got to make sure I'm reading this right. Yeah, this is a pile of Affinity, just glory right here. Yeah. This is insane. So don't forget about that card where they tried to bring Hardened Scales back, which it's a powerful card, but it just couldn't live up to the fact that Mox Opal had been banned, and it just still wasn't quick enough for Modern.
Which card are you talking about?
We're talking about the Ozolith.
Okay.
Now,
that was not enough on its own.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good card. It just wasn't enough on its own because it relied on other things. It wasn't free, like, you know what I mean? I don't mean to pick the card apart, but it just wasn't going to take the spot and make up for the power level of losing Mox Opal. But in case you haven't heard of it, the Ozolith, 1 mana legendary artifact. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may move all counters from the Ozolith onto target creature. So, the way this works with modular is the modular trigger goes off twice, basically, with this. Right? So your modular goes onto a creature, but those counters also go onto the Ozolith. So now with your Zabaz, right? Like, you have essentially generated an absolute shit ton of counters. And let's not even talk about if you had Hardened Scales on the board when this happened. Just yet. But like, with those two, you're already getting so many mad counters on these 1-drops that, like, you're almost guaranteed to get some of the busted combo cards that you need within the first couple of turns. And that's all it takes in Hardened Scales to get an Inkmoth Nexus, like, absolutely through the roof to 10 very, very quickly. You know what I mean? That's all it takes. Or, heaven forbid, a Walking Ballista. Or even an Arcbound Ravager is just devastating when you put all of these counters on it, because with an Arcbound Ravager in that case, which I would argue in this specific example is probably your worst one of the ones mentioned that you would want these on. But it's still devastating because what the hell is your opponent going to do if you have another creature on the board? Absolutely nothing. Like, you can't bolt the goddamn thing if, you know, they can just generate mad counters by sacking 1 artifact. Like, it just gets ridiculous.
Well, and that's the big thing about the Ravager when you're talking about maybe that's not as big of a card, but really, that was your sole sack outlet.
Yeah, which I don't think it's a sole sack outlet either. The Zabaz is a sack outlet.
Well, I was saying it was the
Yes,
sole sack outlet.
True.
So when we're talking about why Zabaz is suddenly making this deck, because the other thing is, we're talking about Zabaz, like that's the big thing for this episode. But there is I think a better Mox Opal replacement in here. What's a quote unquote free card that is going to make mana, that is going to make artifacts, get artifacts? Urza's Saga, the land.
Oh yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
It's better than Mox. God, is better than Mox Opal in some ways here, because you can play this on turn 1, and it makes mana.
Yeah.
And then it goes and gets your Zabaz, or it goes and gets your Ozolith, and it goes and gets your animation module.
Or it goes and gets your welding jar, which is like, you know,
just to protect your whatever you got on board.
That was a slot where a lot of the Hardened Scales decks would jam 2 or 3 sometimes in there, just because it's so useful to have. If you have all of your other stuff, it's just like, well, you're dead and there's really nothing you can do about it. And if you do something about it, you're probably still dead next turn. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was so demoralizing. And especially the tricks that you can do with Welding Jar and Walking Ballista that people just don't talk about because it's not so obvious until you're caught in that situation. You know what I mean? You get a 2/2 Walking Ballista and you swing in with a 3/3. You might think, oh, yeah, he's just going to regenerate, but I'm going to take care of that Welding Jar. No, you're going to lose your 3/3. Yeah, and you just might not notice that right away. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. It sneaks under the radar. There's a lot of dirty tricks. There has always been dirty tricks in Affinity.
I think that's why it's your deck of choice.
It really is. It's just dirty. You know what I mean? There's no better feeling than realizing your opponent doesn't know what's about to happen. There's just so many dirty tricks. But yeah, and this just Zabaz really just pushes that over the top and gives you a Hardened Scales on a stick. It gives you a sack outlet for the cost of 1 mana. You know what I mean? You got to pay the red mana.
Right, but you have another sack outlet on.
You have another way to get rid of your modular dudes. And this deck in particular is using both Arcbound Worker and Zabaz, which...
You know what else is cool? And I pointed it out when I read this deck list. Zabaz is legendary, which means even if you don't have enough mana lying around to sacrifice it, you can just play a second one.
Right. It's just so good. It's like it's one of those, it solves a lot of problems for 1 mana.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you brought that up. That's so sneaky. It's so sneaky because at that point it sees itself deliver the modular counters.
Yep.
Like that is just very sneaky. You know, it's got the evasiveness by being able to give itself flying. So if it is your last resort, you know what I mean? It's not like a worker where, you know, you can get it as big as you want, but it's still a worker at the end of the day, and it's not going to get past just chumps on the ground. This guy can. You know, there's a lot of problems that are solved in this. And the other problem is one that you brought up is that, yeah, it's legendary, but you're not really dissatisfied if you draw multiples.
What is this? Run afoul. Interesting. Looking in the sideboard over here, okay, more welding jars, that makes sense. Some graveyard hate, that makes sense. Some removal, that makes sense. And then I'm like, run afoul. M21, instant target opponent sacrifices a creature with flying.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
So what is that hitting in other decks? Like, I do understand flyers are a problem, but none that I would devote in previous versions of this deck an entire card in the sideboard for.
So you've got Niv Mizzet, the 5-color Niv Mizzet decks are pretty popular.
Smash through them.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't think they're winning with the flyer, though, are they?
If you want an Ink Moth, and you want to,
I suppose, yeah.
I don't know. It worked for this person. Let's look at so that's interesting. I think that's a super cool card. I don't know that there's anything in this list that's spec worthy.
Inkmoth, Spirits, Mantis Rider. Mantis Rider might be on its way out. Oh, Shalai. Oh God, yeah, that's a good one. No, because you still have to target. You can't. It won't take care of it. You have to target the player, and they have hexproof with Shalai, so that doesn't even work with it. But still, yeah, I guess opposing flying chumps can kind of be weird.
Yeah.
And
you want to get in early with one swing. You know, with your Ink Moth or something, or you get in one swing, and then they play a blocker, and you just need to close it out.
Yeah, and Mantis Rider, I would argue, is probably on its way out, if I'm being honest on humans. I'm not a humans expert, but there just seems like there's better options at the 3-drop slot, or even at lower costs now.
There's a lot of confusion in the ranks, to use a Magic card terminology.
Heyo.
Humans is not necessarily crushing it right out the gates yet. But I think Urza's Saga is being adopted again, modern, legacy, all over the place. This deck is also using 2 Power Depot, which makes mana of any one color to cast an artifact spell or activate an ability of an artifact.
Again, how the hell did we miss this? It's a land with modular 1.
Yeah, because it comes in tap.
It's an artifact land with modular 1.
Mm-hmm.
What?
And this is an uncommon.
You're like, yeah, because it comes into play tapped. We probably saw that and we're like, this card.
Well, I think a lot of people did.
Yeah.
And again, Hardened Scales, I think, specifically says creature. So you don't get 2 counters on your Land of War Reborn. You don't get 2 counters on your.
Does Power Depot say or abilities?
It says abilities.
Oh,
so that's the only way that you can, in this deck, that you can give Zabaz flying.
Wow.
Before going through the rest of these, I also want to talk about first place in the Legacy Challenge.
What is this? Another Affinity style deck?
Oh, look, another Affinity deck.
Oh,
4 Arcbound Ravager. And this is running 1 Zabaz, but it is running the full 4 Urza's Saga, as well as all of the relevant artifact lands.
Wow.
4 Nettle Cyst, which is a new card from Modern Horizons 2.
We were just talking before the cast, and Brad showed me that, and I was like, where the fuck did Nettle Cyst come from? And where has it been all my life?
4 Thought Monitor from Modern Horizons 2. So let's see. Right now we're at 4, 8, 12, 13, 17 new cards from Modern Horizons 2 in this deck.
Yeah, that's nuts. So just so that for our audio listeners, the Nettle Cyst thing we were talking about, this just blew my mind. So it's a 3-drop artifact with living weapon, and it says equipped a creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and enchantment you control. So it's like a lord. It's like the the lord, Master of Ethereum. Like, he was a 3-drop artifact, a little bit more intensive on the mana. Because you had to pay 1 blue. He did pump the rest of your team. However, this guy is a lot more evasive. It's an equipment. So like, they need artifact destruction. They can't just have creature destruction to get rid of this.
Well, they can aim for the token.
They could aim for the token, but the artifact is still around. You know what I mean?
True.
Like, so it's like you've gotten rid of a 0/0 essentially, and I'm going to equip this for 2 mana to something else.
And I think that is a huge part of this deck, and with things like Zabaz and one of the other new cards from Modern Horizons 2, Thought Monitor, which is a 2/2 flyer for 7.
Yeah.
But it has affinity for artifacts. That you can make this a 4/4 flyer, or if you had literally nothing else on board, you could make this a 4/4 flyer, but you're not casting any of this stuff unless you have a bunch more artifacts.
Oh, for sure.
So you're right. They can play the Nettle Cyst for 3 mana, and then somebody bounces the token, and then 2 turns later you play Thought Monitor, and then equip.
Yeah.
Literally everything in this deck except for Emery is an artifact, right?
Psy, Master Thopterist, too.
Oh, I didn't see Psy. Yep, Psy and Plains.
Yeah, but like, at the same time, Nettle Cyst, and I just want to point this out, in this legacy deck, there are no cranial platings.
No.
And Nettle Cyst has seemingly taken the place of it.
Yeah.
Like, that if that doesn't speak towards, like, and granted, it's 1 more mana to cast, and it's 1 more mana to equip, but this particular player has seen so much value in the fact that it gives you a damn creature on the battlefield that, like, it's worthy of taking the place of cranial plating. And that's something we haven't seen in a very long time. And trust me, they've tried.
Well, and this is the same thing that's coming up in a lot of conversations right now for decks that are running Stoneforge Mystic. A lot of people are playing with the new card Cauldron Complete, which is a 7 mana living weapon that has haste and indestructible, and equipped creature is indestructible. And people are like, they're talking about it now in Tron potentially. And there's this argument that says, oh, well, I'm going to play the other living weapon card, the Batterskull, because of the life gain. But that doesn't have haste.
Yeah.
Like, this Cauldron Complete, if you're going to cheat it in with Stoneforge Mystic, swings.
Wow.
And with haste, and they're saying the same thing. Like, it might be more expensive, but it impacts the board immediately.
Right. And if it has haste and it's swinging for that much, like, you no longer have to awkwardly, and I do mean awkwardly, play Stoneforge Mystic, tutor up a Batterskull, and then pass the turn next turn. Like, it's so awkward because if you're the player in that position, you almost have to feign the fact that you're holding up a counterspell or something to interact with them, because otherwise you've just blown your turn and they know exactly what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So it's just very awkward. And, you know, it almost just entices your opponent to play something devastating on that turn. And if you counter it, I don't give a shit. Not only did you counter it, but I stopped you from doing something equally as busted.
From putting that weapon in, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Cauldron Complete, living weapon, indestructible, equipped creature gets +5/+5 First strike, trample, indestructible, haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a creature, exile that creature.
Yeah, get out of town, dude. That's pretty good.
It's busted. But back to this legacy challenge. I think you're right. Nettlecyst seeing play is telling.
Yeah, very, very.
And Urza's Sagas, if you're going to a pre-release event this weekend or you're cracking some packs over the next week, I would just hold on to them. I mean, chances are, yeah, you might be able to sell it this week for a higher price than it's going to be next week or 2 weeks from now because the prices just can't hold where they're at. But if you're going to, this card's just going to be playable forever. So unless you're the kind of person that's like, I'm going to sell this today for $40 and buy him again in 2 weeks at 30, I'm just going to hold on to him.
Right. I'm curious about this Aethersworn Canonist too, and what the price of that might be right now, because
it was just reprinted.
It was. Oh, yeah. That's beautiful, because this is now main decked in Legacy. And I've seen this happen before, I'm not going to lie, where they main deck Aethersworn Canonist in Legacy, because historically it's been, pretty busted. Like, people play shit pretty quickly. Storm decks exist in Legacy, and they're like modern Storm decks on steroids. They're stupid quick. And, if you're not solving the problem by turn 2, you're definitely waiting too long. But so either way, but now 4 of these in the main deck with ample ways. You can tell it's a focus of the deck because they had so many white sources. The Ancient Den, the regular planes, that's not just to give Zabaz flying. Well, that's to cast your damn Canonist.
And Esper Sentinel on 1.
Yeah, oh, exactly. They're really taking a white focus here, and which really plays into what we talked about last week, and I've talked about in episodes prior. White is just getting some cards these days, and when the day comes where artifact decks, affinity decks, start focusing more on white
mana
than the blue, and they can actually main deck for Aethersworn Canonist. That is a huge sign for me as a traditional, affinity player for so many years. I'm just that's a big, significant change. When the mana base changes to a different color, something busted has just happened.
Yeah.
A la Hardened Scales. When they started focusing on green so much, you're something busted.
Green affinity?
Yeah, something busted just happened. Are you running the Forger guy that has the Metalcraft? No, you're running Hardened Scales because it's busted. Yeah. And now you see, not only does the Zabaz have the white ability, but you've got, the Esper Sentinel, and you've got Aethersworn Canonist, and you've got these cards that are just pushing affinity to the point where it's okay, white is too powerful to ignore at this point.
Oh, baby. Tell me more.
Yeah.
I think that the Esper Sentinel is a huge draw. That'll be another card, and it's just, Sam Picard said it in the chat, there's no way boxes of this set hold their EV. They're so high because every mythic and every rare is a $40 card right now.
Yeah.
And you just can't have a set where every single rare is $40.
Yeah, no way.
And that Esper Sentinel, a 4 of, again, first place Legacy challenge. It's the first one. We haven't seen it come up 3 weeks in a row yet. But this card just says, in Legacy, how many times are you going to play this on turn 1 and your opponent's not going to play a non-creature spell on their turn?
It's very rare. Even if, and it's each turn too. So even if they hold up a fetch land because you're getting all creative and playing around Wasteland and they're going to brainstorm.
Yeah, they're going to do it on your turn.
And it doesn't matter. It's just okay, yep, it'll still trigger. And now it's going to trigger when you play your next non-creature spell on your turn. It's really good. And I tell you all that to say, the fact that it's running 4 Aethersworn Canonists, and especially when we're going off of the assumption that, Modern is kind of becoming the next Legacy, it really makes me wonder what direction Modern Affinity or even Modern Hardened Scales will go into. Will it splash more white? Will it, adopt some of these cards that are completely Modern legal that are being used in Legacy for this deck? Granted, you got some drawbacks about the artifact lands that can't be used.
That's the big thing, yeah.
But at the same time, I don't really think that matters as much as the fact of the power level of these cards being put on pure display here in Legacy.
But what if, just follow me down this rabbit hole.
Yep.
You didn't actually have to pay for your spells.
What do you mean, Brad?
I mean, the next most popular basically deck right now in Modern are these new Cascade decks that are exploiting some of the Modern Horizons 1 and Modern Horizons 2 suspend spells, and the fact that we now have Shardless Agent to cascade into them, or our other value creatures.
God.
And so here's a blue-green list. Sorry, this is blue-green-red, whatever the hell that is.
Yeah.
Sultai? Maybe? Sultai? I don't know. Anyway, we're looking at a list here that's running 4 Bone Crusher Giant because you won't cascade into that, but it is a shock as well as a creature. Mm-hmm. 4 Brazen Borrower because it is a Vapor Snag, but you won't cascade into it. 4 Shardless Agent. 4 Subtlety. Teamer, thank you. Yeah. You can tell it's been a while since I've actually sat across a friggin' card table. Sorceries. 4 Crashing Footfalls. This is a suspend 4 for 1 green card that makes 2 4/4 rhinos with trample. So,
wow.
Can I play Shardless Agent and then end up with 10 power in play? Yes, sir, I can.
Wow. Wow. And it's so fair. It's like, that's not entirely busted.
No.
It's like, especially when you consider what Modern looks like these days. 10 power on turn 2 or 3.
By the way, talking about cards that, slipped by, did you notice that Fire Ice is in Modern now?
Yes. Fire and Ice has that always been in Modern?
No.
No?
No. It's printed in Modern Horizons 2. They only put, when they print a card in, except for the fetch lands, of course, they have a caveat this time.
Wow.
But any reprints in these sets are new to Modern.
Wow. First of all, I never knew Fire and Ice wasn't in Modern. That blows my mind. But now that we're looking at it, is this...
It's not awesome, but you can cascade and cast either half.
And you can force the negation it. Oh
yeah,
my god, it's a burn.
Pitch it to force.
It's a burn spell you can force. Oh my god. God damn. Yeah, that's good.
And so what has given this deck life that it didn't have before? Well, Shardless Agent, Subtlety, which is the evoke counterspell.
Yep.
Fire and Ice that can be either creature removal, card draw, burn that you can cascade into.
This is a tempo deck, man.
Yeah.
This is straight tempo. It's just saying I'm going to stop all of the busted stuff you're doing very early, and then I'm just going to put something stupid into play, and you're going to have to deal with it. Wow.
Third place list. This is a Niv Mizzet Reborn. So you were saying, what's the flyer I want them to sack for 1 mana? I would like you to sack that 6/6 flyer that just drew you 4 cards. This is running, as far as new cards, General Ferris Rokirik.
Wow, so he's a what is it? What's his power and toughness? He's a 3/1 for 3 mana. Hexproof from monocolored. When you cast a multicolored spell, create a 4/4 red and white golem artifact creature token. Value. Right.
So in this deck, if you go land Utopia Sprawl, this guy on 2, and they don't kill it, every other spell in the deck makes 4/4s.
Oh my god.
Bring to Light makes a 4/4. Omnath makes a 4/4. Renin 6 makes a 4/4. Teferi makes a 4/4. Abrupt Decay makes a 4/4. Kaios Gal makes a 4/4. Lightning Helix makes a 4/4. Vanishing Verse, which is my snap this up this week, is a 4/4.
Wow. Yeah.
And then they kill that, and then you play another land and a removal spell, and
God, man, I feel like it's I would look at this deck and I would be like, it's too slow. But it's using that Utopia Sprawl, dude.
Well, and
it just gets out of control real quick.
4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 removal spells if you don't count Ren and 6 into Fairy Time Raveler as interaction.
Right.
And 2 Wraths.
Wow. It just blows my mind. Like, this is filled with 2-drop answers, and it's getting there.
Well, and again, Picard in the chat, it is looking like Modern is in a place where you can pretty much play whatever you want.
And is that a healthy format? That's an interesting question. Is that a healthy format? I would argue it is. But at the same time, like, it speaks to the power level of just about every card allowed right now.
Here's the next list in Modern. This is the 4th place list. So every list that we've looked at, new cards.
Yep.
We didn't talk about this, I think, when we talked about cards in the set. This is Grist the Hunger Tide. It is Golgari Planeswalker. It is 1 black-green for a 3 loyalty Planeswalker, which has some of the weirdest text ever written on a Planeswalker. It says, as long as Grist the Hunger Tide isn't on the battlefield, it's a 1/1 insect in addition to its other types.
What? How is this at all useful?
Because you can Collected Company and put a Planeswalker into play.
Oh my god!
Because you can
oh my god!
Because you can unearth a Planeswalker onto the battlefield.
Oh my god! What?
Because you can Worldly Tutor for a Planeswalker. Because everywhere else in your deck, on the stack, whatever.
Oh my god, that's so stupid.
Yeah. And then, so when you think about it that way, it's a mediocre Planeswalker. But if it's a mediocre Planeswalker that you hit in a Coco,
or with Unearth,
or
my God.
With anything else that returns a creature card from your graveyard to your hand.
Wow. We have reached a whole new age of Magic.
We really have. This deck is also running Ignoble Hierarch.
The Ignant Hierarch.
This deck is also running Yavimaya Cradle of Growth.
Wow. Geralf's Messenger. So does it run the guy that? Yep, Yawgmoth.
Yeah.
Yep, Yawgmoth,
yeah. So this
Thran
is
Physician.
Yep. This is that green-black sacrifice deck.
Oof.
And it's very interesting. So I listened to, I'm trying to think of the guy's name, Ross Merriam.
Yep.
Talk about green-black infect and why it was like the best infect creatures were green and black, but green-black infect never really got anywhere in Modern. And then he started talking about Ignoble Hierarch.
Ooh, and its synergy with the good infect creatures.
Yeah. He's like, so now you can basically, you could either switch out your nobles, your noble hierarch for ignoble hierarchs, or you could really have 6 or 8 nobles in that deck.
Wow.
So that your one infect creature is getting pumped by the Exalted, but the fact that it gave you black without having to really mess up your mana base.
God, that's cool.
There's just so many goddamn cards in here. And again, that's a rare.
Yeah.
Yavimaya Cradle of Growth, that's a rare. Grist the Hunger Tide, that Planeswalker, that's a mythic. We didn't even talk about that when we talked about cards in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. God, man, this is it's so weird because this set, it feels like, you remember when in Plane Shift, when they started trying to cross the color wheel, and they did it in a very direct way. Like, they had cards such as, and I know now that my brain has called for examples, I'm going to lose all of them, but I'll tell you what they did. They had cards that were red that would bounce things. They were crossing the color wheel in a very direct way.
Yeah.
They were like, this is a red card, and it bounces. It was the Goblin. It was, he had Echo. Or not Echo, but I don't know. He was a red card that bounced something for very, very cheap mana. And they had they had the Pongify in a different color. They had Keen Sense, which was, draw cards in green for very efficient mana. I feel like they're crossing the color wheel in an indirect way with this right here, in the sense of like Ignoble Hierarch. You know what I mean? Giving red and black mana ramp. Red had mana ramp, but all the cards were banned.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? But now they're giving direct mana ramp to black as well. Like, so it's really cool, man. They're crossing it in an indirect way, and I think opening a lot of doors for decks like this.
Looking at the 5th place list from the Modern Challenge on June 6th, we have our friend Ass Moran.
Oh, shit.
This is a food deck. This is a food deck that's using Asmoron. Asmoronica Dystina Kuldakar. Almost. Maybe in 10 years I'll have that.
Someone fell asleep on the keyboard back when they were creating this shit for Alpha.
And every other podcast that I've listened to, they talk about the story behind this card. I'm not going to retell it, but there is an interesting story behind this card, and you're like, until you hear the story, you're like, I think you're full of shit. This was not an alpha.
Yeah.
Like this, and apparently this name was there was flavor text on a card in alpha that was from this character. So that's the reference in alpha, it was flavor text with this stupid ass long name.
Wow.
Anyway, this deck is a Cauldron Familiar Feasting Troll King deck. And basically what it wants to do is it wants to use Asmoron it wants to discard cards and discard Asmoron to discard Cauldron Familiars, put Feasting Troll Kings in the graveyard, use the Underworld Cookbook to make food tokens to bring back Feasting Troll King. You can also, whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you can return Oval Chase Daredevil from your graveyard to your hand, and then you pitch it to Underworld Cookbook to make a food token.
Wow.
Which then lets you put that back in your hand. So And with Cauldron Familiar, the cat, you sacrifice a food and return it to the graveyard, and each opponent loses a life. So you can damn
Borderless Foil Feasting Troll Kings, $50. Oh my God. Wow.
This deck is just
that is bonkers.
Absolutely silly.
Yeah. Do you remember those? Were you guys playing Magic Arena when Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven became a thing? I
hated that.
Oh my God. I remember playing on Magic Arena, and I was just like, oh, this guy's got a little 1/1 there. That's kind of cool. And then before you know it, he had the Witch's Oven, and then he had the Devil. And,
Mayhem Devil, and you're done.
Yeah, I remember the first time I learned about this devastating combo of, 1-drop cards. I was like, all right, I'm just going to swing in. What are you going to do about it? And sure as shit, he, blocks in a bunch of ways, and then he's just like, yeah, before damage, sack, bam, 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 blow shit up. I'm like, what? What the just happened? And, now you're telling me they've got this deck on crack over here in Modern.
Yep.
Of course they do. Of course they do. This is just nuts.
I just scrolled to the next deck, the 6th place deck, and I'm like, oh, here we go. I'm not seeing any new cards. Oh, wait. This is basically a blue-white control deck. Teferi 5, Teferi 3, Snapcasters, some Wrath, some counter spells. But it's playing 4 counter spell, and I'm like, oh, that's a new card. And then I scroll down and it's playing Brainstone.
Oof.
Which is Brainstorm as an artifact. And
it's running 4 Urza's Sagas in a control deck?
Yeah.
Busted. If that doesn't tell you Urza's Saga is busted, I don't know what will. Well, they got control decks running it.
Right. And so what can that even get you? It can get you this Brainstone. It can get you Expedition maps, which 100% those Expedition maps are just to get more Urza's Sagas. Right. And Mishra's Baubles.
Oh, my God.
And Picard, damn it, man. You got to let me get there myself. That's the win con.
What?
Well, I mean, yeah, you could win with a Teferi Ultimate.
Yeah.
You could win with Snapcaster Beats. But really, your win con is the Karnstruct.
Oh, my God. What the hell is this format now?
If
my affinity deck gets beaten by a control deck with an artifact creature, I'm going to be pissed. This is just ridiculous.
Oh, also reprinted and in the sideboard, Zurin Orb.
Oh, my God.
New to Modern. Primeval Titan decks are loving this.
Oh, I bet, man.
7th place. It's a Ad Naz deck. Finally. Oh, wait. There's more.
Oh,
You're like,
man.
and were we finally to a deck that doesn't have new cards?
Nope.
No, 4 Profane Tutor, suspend 2.
It's the new demonic tutor with suspend.
Yeah.
God. God. The state of Modern is busted. But I'm going to tell you one thing. Is when you're fired up about Modern, you just got to know. You can play any deck you want. You theorize these ridiculous cards, just put them in a deck. It'll probably work. But that is why I'm so fired up about our new boy, Zabaz.
Zabaz, the Glimmerwasp.
I'm just going to focus on what I know. And I know that that's pretty busted. And I'm just happy we're getting some new toys for Hardened Scales.
So I'm happy that the 8th place list, we finally got to one, has 0 new cards in it. And it was somebody that's just like, I play Eldrazi Tron, and that's just what I play. And they still top 8'd this.
Does it
challenge.
surprise you that a Tron deck was the one that didn't change shit and it's still like top 8'd? Does it? Are we at all surprised by that official opinion of the SnapCast podcast?
It's not like Karn liberated Ugin Tron. It's Eldrazi Tron.
Yeah.
The 9th place list, played by MTGO player Ann_actual_potato, is the primetime deck that is running. Hey, look, Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth.
Wow.
And that's all I'm seeing right now.
Yep. Did you see our boy Magic AIDS try to put together an elf deck with that Yavimaya, the new Yavimaya card?
No, how did that go?
It wasn't as good as I expected for his level of creativity. It was decent, but the theory behind it was that one of the elf lords gives all of your elves forest walk. Yeah, and so they're just all unblockable. He did confuse a lot of people with that. They didn't expect it.
Yeah, they're like,
but
why can't I block?
But at the end of the day, it's still an elf deck and like loses to Tron.
I still want to try the green Eldrazi deck with that land. This looks like your kind of thing.
No,
I see Hedron crabs.
This is
dredge. This is drill.
This is drill. This is drill that we saw. Our good friend run at at a competitive tournament. This is drill. This is Clark's deck.
Yeah.
Wow. Does it run the new Hedron crab in conjunction to Hedron crab?
No.
What?
No. So I wonder if this is just somebody else that's just like, I have these cards on Magic Online, and that's just what I play.
Oh, because it says each opponent. The new one says each opponent. Yeah.
Utopia Sprawl, Arbor Elf, Auriok Champion. This is just Heliod Company.
Wow.
Nothing new there.
Wow.
Man, Modern looks cool.
It really does.
And if you had asked me, well, Modern events started at our shop last Friday, I think.
People back in seats. Butts in seats.
Or the Friday before, and I was just like, I want to see what Modern Horizons 2 does. Like, what cards am I going to need? What deck am I going to play? I'm not that much in a hurry, but I'm going to play tomorrow at the pre-release for Modern Horizons 2.
It's a good set too, man.
It's such a good set.
It's one of those ones where you're not really going to be upset with what you crack.
No, well, and I don't think you can. I don't think that there are unplayable rares.
Yeah.
It's absolutely busted. Hey, you know your pick last week from the cast when we were like, snap this up, cards that could be unbanned?
Oh, yeah.
Your Golgari Grave Troll, I swear, like, we didn't know this last week when we were talking, but it looks like maybe it had started coming up a little bit the week before, but
people are specking.
Last week was the, June 3rd, and it's gone up $1 since then.
Dude, and that's 33%. Like, that's, I mean, if my stocks did that in a week, I'd sell them. I'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, good move. Like, that's an insane increase. I don't think we're the only ones thinking about this. Like what we talked about last week, where Modern is getting to the point where it's so busted, I wouldn't be surprised if they revisited the ban list real soon. I don't think we're the only people thinking about that.
My pick, Cavern of Souls, went from 73 to 77. It's not quite as big a jump.
Still, though. I mean, well, our whole point on Cavern of Souls is don't spec on them. Don't buy a shit ton of these like they're going to go up in value. But it's one of those things.
They're cheaper now than they're going to be in a month.
Barring any, if they don't reprint this anytime soon, this is also going to be something you don't want to get caught with your pants down with, not having these, because it's definitely something.
Another card that we've talked a lot about just over the last month or so, and with all this hype around Modern Horizons 2, don't forget about Strixhaven. You like this card a lot.
I thought Brad started casting when I was on my phone, and I was going to be like, don't mind me, I'm just buying my Strict Proctors right now. It's like something diving in value and continuing to go down, and you're just like, literally people are wrong about this card. And Strict Proctor, I think, is one of those. I hadn't bought a playset yet, but I noticed that I can get a playset for $5 right now. So I'm like, I'm just going to get my playset. And it was one of those buys where I'm like, I'm not going to buy shit tons of this card.
You're just going to get your playset.
I'm going to get my playset while I can get them for $5 for the entire playset. Because I feel like this card is, we talked about it last week, where it's just there's so many interactions, and it gives people the option to pay. And it's just so good. And it triggers for permanents, too, which is unique.
Here's my snap this up this week. And I'm just sort of similarly to the Cavern of Souls. I'm not saying necessarily spec on this card, but I'm saying if you might ever play black-white in EDH or Modern or Pioneer, you're going to want a set of Vanishing Verses, and you can get the cool full art foils for less than $10 right now. Exile target monocolored permanent.
2 mana instant.
2 mana instant. Exile effect for, like in EDH when somebody goes, here's my Avacyn, all my shit's indestructible. You're like, oh, if I could only have 14 Path to Exiles in my deck. You've got Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile and hopefully Vanishing Verse. There's a lot of hype around black-white. We're talking about white becoming more popular and more powerful. WotC's putting a push on white cards. I'm telling you, Vanishing Verse is a card you won't regret owning.
Can I tell you because we are a competitive, we are a casual Magic podcast here. Can I tell you a casual combo that just popped into my head that pushes that over the top?
Yes.
Just chuck a Painter's Servant into play and call a color, and that gets lands. It gets land. It doesn't say non-land. You throw a Painter's Servant in there, you can get artifacts too with this thing.
Right. You could hit a Dryad Arbor with this.
Oh my god.
Dryad Arbor is green.
Oh my god.
Tells you that right on the card.
It really next levels the grindstone plays in Legacy too, because you can be like, I'm gonna call colors that you actually have in your deck because I don't want to paint too much on them. You know what I mean? That's hilarious.
That's
casual combo right here. Just thinking outside the box with shit that will never be playable. Don't mind me.
I don't know. I'm actually, and I think you said this as well, I'm looking forward to playing Modern. And I haven't felt that way, despite being sort of away from the game for so long with the pandemic and being at home. I've been quite content to just play a couple of games of Commander every week and call it good.
Yep.
This set is probably the best thing they could have done post-pandemic to say, come on, motherfuckers, it's a
Come
whole
on
new
out.
game.
Let's play some Magic, shall we?
And they got me.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
they got
absolutely,
me.
dude. Well,
This
hey,
was-
guys. Thank you so much for joining us this week. It's a pleasure, as always, having you guys drop in and shoot the shit with us here on the SnapCast podcast. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, share the news with your friends, let them know, hey, we know two jackasses.
They talk about Magic cards.
They talk about Magic, and it's, it's fun to go chat with them.
Hey, I just saw, and I want to give him a shout out. Michael Corlew was in the chat. That must have slipped by me. Thanks for hanging out with us, Mike.
Appreciate you. Appreciate you guys for coming in. Hope you guys have a great weekend. We will catch you next week. Peace.